Hey guys, welcome to another video on the channel. Today we will be discussing something that is often overlooked, and that is the OSD customization. Now, unlike setups or equipment like your controller or your wheel, this won't necessarily directly increase your pace, but it will help with consistency and maybe a bit of immersion as well. So what you want to do is load a Grand Prix. Don't load time trial because some of the settings on previous F1 games, some of the settings weren't available to change in the time trial menu. So load a Grand Prix, then wait for the race to start so that you can see the telemetry, your HUD, the timing pillars, etc. And then once the race has started, pause, go to settings, on-screen display, and OSD customization. Now, this is where the fun begins. Now, this will take roughly 15 to 30 minutes, depending on if you've done this before or not, and also how peculiar you are that things look the same. Because if I pause it right here, you'll see that the bottom left, there's a thing that says layout race. Now, if you on a controller, it's the right analog stick. If you press that in, that'll actually then toggle between race. I think it's qualifying. There's a time trial. There's, I think on F124, there's elimination mode where you can set the OSD for all the different sessions. Now, I'm not sure why that's the case and why you can't just set it once and it applies to all of them. But unfortunately, you have to do this each time for every layout. So be sure to start off with the race layout. But remember to do this for qualifying and time trial as well. Now, right next to layout, you'll see on the Xbox controller, it's Y. So on the PlayStation, will probably be triangle, which is the filter. Now, I think that just toggles between normal and pits. So when you go to the pits, there's like the whole message of, when to turn into the pits, when to release the clutch, etc. So just make sure you toggle between those as well. So basically, what you want to do is think about your screen. You want to have as big as a view on track going forward because that's where most of your attention is going to be. You don't really want to be too focused on what's going on behind you because you're not racing behind you, you're racing ahead of you. I know some people do like to have the rear view mirror enabled. I don't. I find it very distracting. And it also does eat quite a bit of your performance from your console or your PC because it's an extra POV that needs to be rendered and drawn, and those frames need to be generated for each frame, obviously. So yeah, I just find it distracting, so I turn mine off. And as you can see from my POV, my camera settings, my mirrors are actually in a very nice place. So I just use the car mirrors to judge what's going on behind me instead of the actual rear view mirror. But anyway, so what I do, just to give you some background, I've got a 27-inch 1080p monitor, which is roughly a meter from my face, I'd say, maybe 1.2 meters from my face. So it's not a massive screen, but it's big enough that I can easily read what's going on everywhere on the screen. So what I've done is all of the elements on the OSD I shrink to 80% size, so from 100 down to 80%, and then I move them. So you'll see the left timing pillar, I've moved that to the top left of the screen. The right lap time timing pillar, I've moved to the top right. The track map, I've moved a bit up so that it's not in front of the car mirror anymore. The MFD on the right, I've moved that up and to the side so that it's not in front of the car mirror anymore. The HUD, where you can see your throttle and ERS and all those things, I've moved that a bit up as well so that you can see the steering wheel, because sometimes it's nice to know in a lap what your delta is towards your best lap or something like that. And I know that doesn't necessarily show up on the top right during the race, which is nice to see on your steering wheel, or you can see your tire temps on your steering wheel. So it's nice to see the steering wheel and not have the HUD in front of it. And so once you've moved everything to the place where you want it, then you've got to use that layout button that I showed you earlier. So then you've got to go to qualifying and do it again. Now, what does help to make it a bit faster that I noticed, if you use a controller or a wheel, I wouldn't recommend doing this on a wheel, but you can probably. If you're doing this on a controller, the easiest way to do this is to use the D-pad, the arrows on the D-pad, because the arrows kind of shift everything by a set amount. So every time you press an arrow left, up, right, or down, it shifts that element by a certain amount. So for example, the track map, let's say I click the left arrow 3 times and the up arrow twice. And if I do that for the race layout and for the qualifying layout and for the time trial layout, then the map will be at exactly the same place for all the layouts. Whereas if you use the analog, it's a much more fluid movement. So you get that, for example, the track map would be slightly not at the same place in a race than in qualifying, if that makes sense. Now, obviously for some people that won't matter and that's fine. For me, it matters. Like, you won't notice it if you load between qualifying and the race. You won't notice like a millimeter off, but for me, it's just nice to have everything at the same place. So yeah, I think using a controller is, using the D-pad on the controller is going to save you a lot of time. Because as I said, you can just remember how many clicks you moved each element and then move it the same amount of clicks for all the elements. The only things that are a bit of a hassle to do is timing pillars. Now, for some reason, when you move them a certain amount of clicks, they don't line up again, because you'll see when you edit this yourself, the pillars are different. They're made up of different components, and those components don't line up completely again if you press the D-pad, let's say 3 times left, for example. So that you'll have to do with an analog, and yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare to get them precisely lined up. That's probably what takes the longest out of this whole thing. But once you have that done, then your whole racing experience is going to be transformed, because as you can see from this before and after, on the before photo, the track map is in front of my left mirror, which means sometimes I won't be able to see what's going on in my mirror depending on the track that we're racing at. On the right, you can see as soon as I press the MFD button, it's going to pop up in front of my right mirror. You can see the HUD is in the middle, right in front of the steering wheel, which means I can't see anything that's going on the steering wheel. And also the things like the safety car messages and those things, I've moved them up to the top of the screen so that when they pop up, I can still see them, but they're not impairing my vision. Let's say you're going uphill at Eau Rouge or at Austria, turn 1 or turn 3. You can still see all the cars on track. You know, these little elements aren't going to be distracting you from your race. Right guys, so that was just a quick video on the OSD customization and why it's important to set this. Take 20 minutes, take half an hour. I know it's not lacquer to do these type of things, but it's very necessary, and it's gonna transform your experience on the game for the coming months. And this is something I do at the beginning of each game. Once we load a new game, this is the first thing I do. The first one is the camera settings, then my force feedback settings on my wheel, and if you're on the controller settings, and then the OSD customization. That is like the 3 most important things that you can do to make your racing experience as good as possible. Right guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Cheers.